Thanks. Today I briefed the Council slightly different from what I normally do. It was not a kind of listing up of events that will come in the report on 2334 later in December, in written report from the Secretary General. I looked at what kind of elements we need to address in order to change the situation from where we are on a different trajectory. I told them about the conflict drivers that are the ones we know. It's relating to settlement, expansion, eviction, demolitions, and the drivers must be addressed, including the very precarious situation we have at Haram Sharif and on the holy sites. But there are some major trends that are really hitting us. Demography is running faster than politics. Demography means basically the following. In Gaza, in some few years, we will have 2.7 million people, and we will have 3.7 million at the West Bank. The space available at the West Bank is shrinking for the establishment of a continuous Palestinian state. In the kind of areas, in particular between Jordan Valley and on the plain on the top, we can locate most of the fractions and the conflict zones in and around Nablus. Jenin is a particular case, but we have it in Hebron and we have it around Jerusalem and Bethlehem. These are the key conflict zones that emanates of the congestion of an growing Palestinian population and the expansion of the settlement in space. Finally, is about the strengthening of the Palestinian Authority. That is a superbly important issue. The Palestinians are losing the donors for the lack of attention from the international community. They have to shrink their activity, and they cannot, with this growing population, deliver the services for the Palestinian people as they could have done, and as they did effectively 10 years ago. We are in a very precarious situation whereby the lack of social services to a fast increasing population and a population pyramid that is staggering is putting superb challenges in front of the PA. The PA is one of the more important structures that came out of the Oslo Agreement almost 30 years back. And if we are not keeping that intact in a very constructive way and engaging with them very constructively, this will further aggravate the situation on the ground. The Council is very much on par with the overall objective of what we need to do and not to do. And I'm very happy for that, because even without statements coming out of the Council, the countries in the Council are very much on par with what I said to you now. That is also the line of the Palestinian Authority. And obviously, I discussed what I was going to say to the Council, both to the Israeli side and to the Palestinian side before I came here today. Any questions?
Thank you. Ibtisam Azam.
Thank you. My name is Ibtisam Azim from Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper. I have two questions. First, do you believe that the international community is doing enough to hold the Israeli occupation power accountable and to put enough pressure on them, given the fact that if you look at the American giving $4 billion yearly in military aid and the Europeans having special status for Israel, and so there is no accountability to the occupation. Why would Israel even take any steps to end the occupation? And then the second question, do you have any comments on the fact that in the new Israeli government that's about to be built, there are fascist and Kahana sympathizers and believers? Thank you.
Well, I mean, it's for any country of the UN and for the international community as a whole to stress the accountability of all sides, including Israel. Let me be very clear on that. And it has to do with the way things are moving on the ground, and the terrible loss of lives that we have been seeing spiking this year. That is by far higher in the West Bank in particular than it has been for a long time. I would also stress that Israel has been exposed to terror attacks in an intensity that we haven't seen for a very long time, the most recent one in Jerusalem. And these things combined, are really fueling the tension. There are also some unresolved issues relating to bodies not being handed over to families, both Israeli bodies that are being held, but there are also a huge number of Palestinian bodies that are held also on the Israeli side. These are very sensitive issues, and they need to be addressed. When it comes to the new Israeli government, we should take into account one thing. It's the Israeli population that are electing their own government. Then it is a process of the internal dynamics in Israel that put the different people in position. But I can assure you one thing, UN will work with this government, one way or the other. And we are working with the systems on both sides, and that's how it is. We are not kind of putting any judgment of that. Those who are elected are elected. Those who will get into position will have the position, and UN will deal with that one way or the other.
Thank you. I-24.
Thanks for doing this. 2 questions for you. Have you had any discussions yet or talks with the presumptive government of Israel? And secondly, the Israeli ambassador a month or 2 ago had criticism that your briefings and the general tone of the Security Council briefings got too bogged down in the minutia of the conflict. Your presentation today was much more broad, much different than it's usually been. Is there any correlation there between that criticism and your presentation today and the process going forward from your office?
No, not at all. Not whatsoever. The way we have done this today was planned from my side and from the side of my team way back. I wanted now, based on what the work we have been doing, in particular on de-escalation, to move forward with a broader framework. I have hinted to that framework in the last 2 presentations I had to the Council, but this time I developed it further, and this is the basis on which we will be working as the UN. And this framework is properly discussed on both sides.
Did you have any talks with the presumptive government yet?
No, I'm not starting to work with a government before the government is in place.
Betül Anadolu.
Thank you. This is Betül Yürük with the Turkish news agency Anadolu. 2 questions. How do you plan to deal with the incoming Netanyahu government? Will you have a different approach from the previous government? And what do you expect this new government to do in order to achieve the 2-state solution? Thanks.
Well, I've been dealing with Netanyahu government when I took up this position. I was dealing with the Netanyahu government when we had a de-escalation in Gaza in May last year. And I've been dealing with the Netanyahu government in handling de-escalation and the steps to open Gaza further. So I will stress that what the outgoing government is doing is in line with that and further developing that same thing. I understand your question also because there are different voices in the new government that is public on going in different directions. I will have to deal with that. And that's what I'm going to do. I want to consolidate what we have achieved so far and developing it further for the reason I mentioned in the beginning. We have very little choice but to find a solution where we have a proper divide. What I mean with that, a divide that can create a prospect for 2 states. I see nobody, neither in Israel nor on the Palestinian side, that want this mix we have now. The mix we have now, without the divide, is a recipe for instability, conflict, and escalation that would not be limited to Israel and Palestine, but that may easily have broader and wider regional ramifications.
Just a quick follow-up, Steph, if I may. Do you think it's going to be harder for you to deal with this government?
It's hard to deal with any government in the Middle East.
Kristen Salome, last one.
Kristen Salumi from Al Jazeera English. Thanks. To put it bluntly, what do you see as the greatest impediment to moving forward? And could there be a role for the quartet in moving things along?
Well, for the moment, the quartet is in a difficult and tight corner, as you know very well. I would very much have liked to see that different, but the realities are as they are. Obviously, me as the special coordinator needs to keep all these lines open, and everybody knows that I'm doing that. So that work will continue. You know, there is a whole set of issues that are very difficult to deal with here. I'm not going to pick and choose on who is the more difficult one or the less difficult one. But I would warn against any major expectation that we can make a quick fix with a package just as it looks now. We will need some time to get around the corners here and see where we can and how we can maneuver both with the Palestinian Authority and the PLO on the one side and with the new Israeli government on the other. I mean, this world is like it is. The Middle East is like it is, and the Israelis and the Palestinians are like they are. So I'm in the middle of this, and I've said yes to this job, and I can deal with it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Dual-use materials that you said are entering Gaza for
Yeah.
the first time. What are some examples
Oh, and that is.
of the dual-use materials?
That's very easy. It's engines for the fishing fleet. It is material for repair of boats that has not been in for a long time.
Excuse me, may I ask you just about elections in terms of the Palestinian side? Do you think that new elections would have any impact? I mean, Israel changes their governments pretty quickly, pretty often, but that doesn't seem to be the case on the other side. Do you think that an election might stir things up in terms of?
UN has been advocating the fact that elections should be held in Palestine. We will continue to do that, and we will make our effort and support behind any initiative that can lead to broader parliamentary elections. Thank you.